In this episode of Critiquing Comics, Chad in Amsterdam number 5, an amusing piece of mail, and a couple of big programming announcements. This is Tim.
I'm Mulele.
And this is Critiquing Comics. Welcome to Critiquing Comics. This is Tim with Mulele in Tokyo. How are you doing?
I'm good. And you?
I'm doing okay. And yeah, we got a lot to talk about this time. So let's get to it. So first of all, Chad in Amsterdam number 5 is out already. Blew both of us away. We just talked about issue 4 like a month ago or something. But yeah, sure. We're always happy to read more Chad.
Oh, absolutely.
And this one turns out to be a theme issue, although it's kind of odd that the cover doesn't reflect the theme. The cover, and I didn't understand what it was until I read the back matter, but it's supposed to be, well, quoting him, he and his artist Dotsie were reimagining the whole O.J. Simpson debacle using Amsterdam icons. In lieu of a white Ford Bronco is an orange Canta LX, the sole automobile produced in the Netherlands. The Canta is the only automobile made specifically for disabled people. The car is merely 1.1 meters wide, so it's allowed on both bike and footpaths here in the Netherlands. And of course, the person writing in it is not O.J. Simpson, it's Chad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess I didn't look at it that closely. I'm not sure if I would have picked that up, even if I had stared at it for half an hour. But yeah, okay, I can see it. But the actual theme of the issue centers on the Dutch celebration of the Feast of St. Nicholas, which they call Sinterklaas. And that festival involves a parade, which includes a guy dressed as Sinterklaas riding a horse. And in about, well, he nails it down to 1850, during the era of Dutch colonialism. This guy added an element, well, had added several elements to the kind of mythology of Sinterklaas. And one of those things he added was to give him a helper who is a Moorish guy, black African, with curly hair and earrings and so on. Now, a fuzzy point, though, was that Chad talks about it as one guy, who they call Zwarte Piet or Black Pete, but then it also turns out that there are multiple Petes sometimes, and I didn't quite understand, is there one guy or there a group of guys? I wasn't quite clear on that. And so in these parades, generally Zwarte Piet is played by a white guy in blackface, and it's blackface that looks kind of Al Jolson-y. But if Chad talks to Dutch people about it, they'll always say, oh, Zwarte Piet has soot on his face from going down a chimney, which Chad points out doesn't make any sense because his clothes don't have any soot on them. Yeah. And because, where do the gold earrings come from? Where do the big red lips come from? That wouldn't be caused by the chimney. And he did his research and found that, yeah, indeed, it was all of this stuff that this guy added in 1850 with Zwarte Piet, and with Sinterklaas and Zwarte Piet living in Spain and taking a steamboat to the Netherlands. I don't get that at all. But anyway, so Chad seems pretty outraged by this, but he does a really thorough study of it, and in the first story, which is just called Sinterklaas, he talks about how Dutch people are kind of in denial about it to the point where they really believe that it's just soot. But if you look at the history, it was not intended to be soot.
Yeah. I've kind of got comments all over the place for this.
All right.
So I've never been to Europe, but as a Black American, I do have some feelings about it.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I wanted to point out here was in the beginning of the book, he describes his first time seeing Black Pete in a festival. Mm-hmm. And he says, suddenly I felt nauseous, vertigo set in, visions of blackface from times past began to appear, and et cetera, et cetera. The amalgamated pain of my ancestors burned through every cell in my being. Turn the page and he's like, nah, psych, I ain't catching a vertigo. And it's just a complete kind of shift. Like, it's all dramatic and heavy, and then it's like, nah, whatever. But anyway, and he continues on with his story. My comment on this is to say that it is this thing to confront racism for Black people. It is a thing that is painful and disgusting and does cause anxiety. But we live in it. And so we brush it off. And I kind of felt like he was doing the same thing here. I think it did really upset him, but he brushed it off. Or he brushed off the visceral reaction to it and then began to look at it analytically and to really push through what exactly this thing is that he found so offensive. To really understand it, because as a foreigner coming to this culture to just say, this doesn't jive with me, you need to get rid of it, is kind of a wrong thing. I mean, you don't want foreigners coming into your culture and saying, you fucked up, even if they're right. Mm-hmm. So basically, he dives deep into what it is and gives us the whole history of it, talks about some of the excuses that are made for it, identifies what it is exactly. And by the way, there's a bit of a Twilight Zone reference here that I thought was beautifully drawn and kind of brilliant in its setup. Mm-hmm. So while being offended, while researching this stuff, he still has a sense of humor in his telling of it. And by the way, this artist is excellent.
Right, yeah. We thought we should mention him. His name is D.M. Rodriguez.
Yeah, excellent work here. He seems to have a very quick hand with his art, but he knows what he's doing. And some of it is just really intelligent image making. And also the final page of this, where it's just Chad looking at the camera, talking, and just the emotions in each pose. There's 6 poses on the page, but it does have a really direct, personal feel that Chad is talking to me about this thing that he feels. But at the end, even though he plays academic through the entire thing, he does come to a final point. And sorry about the spoilers, but I think it's necessary to say here. Because in the year 2020, the Netherlands is the only country on the planet actively claiming blackface is a part of their culture. And honestly, if you think blackface is your culture, then your culture ain't shit. This, and after that, it just says end, and that's the end of the story. This is such a hard rebuke of Black Pete that it's on the level of the vertigo that he talks about in the beginning of the story. And my feeling is the academic side of this is not to say that he didn't feel something about this, but just to say, okay, I'm going to tell you why I felt this. He may be playing with the words a little bit, but I am sure 150% that he was so disgusted with it that he wanted to talk about it. not only for this story, but for this entire issue.
Yes. Yeah, well, you can tell it got under his skin since the whole issue is about that.
Yeah. But this story is, in my mind, perfect. The art is excellent. The writing is very focused, and his questions, or rather his investigation, to my mind, is very honest and open to the opinions of the people around him. He includes them here in the story, like the Dutch woman that he knew or knows, who exclaimed, "Black Pete isn't racist, you're racist."
Yeah, that was where the Twilight Zone part came in. How is Chad racist for saying it's blackface?
Yeah, so I mean, some of it was used for humorous effect, but clearly you on some level you got to be on Chad's side here if you're reading this book.
Mm-hmm.
But I do feel that he investigated a lot of things that were maybe uncomfortable for him in the moment, but needed to be kind of focused on in this thing. And it's not to say that, well, I guess it is to say that, but basically the ending of this, I agree with. Not because I'm offended by blackface, which I am, but because he does go through the analytical side of it and does kind of look at the history of it and say, okay, well, this is what it is. And to say that he, that Black Pete is black because he went down a chimney is not just to make fun of black people, but also to erase them from the history of what it is, which is doubly offensive, really.
Yeah.
Not only did you ridicule them, you erased them when people said, "Hey, wait a minute." So yeah, for me, it's a perfect story. This was, in my feeling, one of the best stories of Chad in Amsterdam in the entire series.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Oh, excellent! I'm glad we both agree.
And I'd like to say again about Rodriguez's art. I mean, it's so sharp. I mean, I can easily see Marvel giving him a job or him getting an Image book or something like that. I mean, it's kind of that, slightly humorous but also pretty realistic style, kind of writing the line between cartoony and realistic.
Yeah. But somewhere in here, there's also a variance of style. So there's some parts that look a little bit like Mad Magazine, some parts that look like Bugs Bunny, some parts that look like the Santa Claus from the Coca-Cola commercials.
Yeah.
Some
one that looks like a stained glass window.
Yeah, I mean, it's all so well crafted and so well done. If he's just quick and good like that, then my God, he's amazing. I wish I had that skill. But yeah, this is really, really on point. His artwork is amazing. And, well, all I can say is, if people aren't throwing money at this person, they should be embarrassed. People, I mean companies.
Yes.
Because companies are people too. But
Supreme Court said so.
Yeah. Marvel and DC should be throwing money at this guy to get him to do something. Or maybe he's like, I'm not about superheroes. And but someone should be giving him some kind of job to be doing something. If they're not, it's a crime.
Yeah. All right. So after that, we get a 2-page silent comic called Determined Pete, drawn by, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, L-A-E, Lay Schaefer. This is a more cartoony story, and it's Chad's kind of the backstory Chad settled on for something he saw in a Sinterklaas parade once, where there were several Black Petes involved, and one of them was in a wheelchair with a cast on his leg, and he was just surprised that someone would be so, as he put it, so into blackface that he would, get himself out there even when he's got a broken leg to be in the parade. So in this cartoon, you see this guy riding a bicycle, getting hit by a car, being in the hospital, pointing to, what is that, November 19th? I think that's a 9.
No, it's 14th.
4? Okay.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell. Okay, November 14th on the calendar, telling the doctor he's got to be up and out by then. And he's still got a cast on, but he rehabilitates himself enough to be in the parade. And so but you don't know what he wants until the last panel, and you see him in the parade in blackface in his wheelchair.
Yeah. One point here, the doctor is black. And in the last panel, he's on the sideline protesting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which I thought was a clever twist to the story. And the story has no words in it, so
right.
You do have to kind of push for some of the understanding. But I mean, the first story, not only is it a thorough rebuke of the whole concept, but it also is a kind of primer, or I don't know, primer, whichever is the correct pronunciation for.
I've heard both.
Yeah, for the rest of the comics that follow, and so
right.
having that makes this one a little bit, or not a lot clearer.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't know what the heck it was if he started with this one.
Yeah, that'd be a little bit too much in the deep end.
Right. All right. Then I was a little confused here because the next story doesn't start with a title page, and at first I thought it was the same story, but no, it's a different artist. Let's see. So this one it turns out to be called Checkmate, drawn by Meryl Behrens, and it shows Chad going grocery shopping, and we just kind of see him, doing standard grocery shopping stuff for the first 2 pages, and then he feels his spider sense. And so on the 3rd page, he's looking around him like something's up, and he sees the people around him, on their phones and looking at magazines and stuff, and then he looks down and there's this kid staring at him, kid in a Pikachu shirt. And Chad smiles and waves at the kid, and the kid's pointing at him and says, "He's Svarta Pete." And Chad looks kind of stunned, staring at the kid. I can't tell if is that a girl maybe? I'm not sure. Well, kind of long hair for a boy, but. And the mother says sorry to Chad, and Chad says, if your holiday wasn't racist, you wouldn't have a reason to be sorry. And then you see the big words checkmate at the end. Words by Chad Bilyue, art by Meryl Behrens, and circa 2010. So that's about the time that this happened, apparently.
Yeah. Was there any information on this story in the back?
Yeah, I think every story had a little bit in the back. Let's see. One of the more paradoxical aspects of the Sinterklaas is the duality between white people's claims that no one sees Svarta Pete as a black person and black people's experiences of being referred to as Svarta Pete. Checkmate is a response to this paradox. The story concerns an incident that happened in the Albert Heijn on Sparendamerstraat. I felt that this comic absolutely had to be created because I've heard folks try to deny the obvious implicit racism inherent in Svarta Pete for over a decade. But that's what I love about children. There's no lying in them. Hopefully your mother and the crowd actually comprehended my point.
Yeah, I have to admit, for my own sense of being in Japan and dealing with this, when I first arrived here, just to kind of date it, it was 1991. I got a lot of MC Hammer. And, I did have the baggy pants because that was the fashion when I, for a 20-year-old kid, when I left the States. And then a few years later, I got Carl Lewis. And then a few years after that, I got fatter, and they said, Akebono. Actually, there was a time when I got Akebono and Carl Lewis at the same time. I don't know what the fuck was going on. Carl Lewis, for anybody who doesn't remember, is was an Olympian. It's like 2 or 3 time Olympian as a runner or a distance jumper. I don't remember exactly which.
Yeah, and Akebono was a sumo wrestler with American, like Hawaiian background.
Yeah, and I'm not that thin. I'm not that fat. Leave me the fuck alone. But there is a little bit of that. But I mean, I felt a little bit weird about it until a friend of mine who used to live on one of the or grew up on one of the air bases. He's a military father, but grew up in Japan. Said, "Hey, I'm not mad at that MC Hammer thing, because after that, I could get laid." And so I do realize there's a little bit of a difference between being compared to MC Hammer, an actual person, and being compared to Zwarte Piet, which is just a really racist caricature. But there is a kind of similar, like, what the fuck moment that you go through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I knew an African-American guy on the base when I worked there who was always getting compared to Jordan. Oh, it's Michael Jordan.
Damn, yeah. I never got the Jordan thing. I guess I'm not tall and lean like that, but...
Well, and he's bald. I think he shaves his head. That might have been part of it.
Yeah, that'd be it.
All right. And then there's a pretty long story called Plaza Negrito. And it took me a little while to figure out what this was. The back matter helped me understand it too. But it's sort of an imagining of, I guess, what if Dutch people were correct in saying that it was soot? But it kind of takes a long time to get there.
Yeah.
So apparently they're in Spain because that's where Sinterklaas is supposed to live. But Sinterklaas is this Arabic guy who runs like a doner kebab place. And he's got this guy talking to him who is in the Zwarte Piet clothing, but he's white. And when it finally kind of gets down to the point, this guy is complaining on behalf of the Piets of the unnecessarily arduous working conditions of having to go down chimneys and getting not only black on your face, but red lips and gold earrings and curly hair and stuff. He's complaining about the conditions of having to go through that. So, I mean, this is kind of the logical explanation, background of if Dutch people were right about it.
Yeah. Actually, this book starts off with 2 Dutch kids who are like homeless, ripping off tourists.
Right. Well, I guess that's part of the story also is that Zwarte Piet, so he talks in his history in the first story about Grampus. I think you and I talked about Grampus once off podcast a long time ago. Like you had seen a movie about Grampus or something.
Yeah, it's called the Krampus with a K.
Or Krampus.
But yeah, I don't remember the movie being very good, but I remember actually there are a couple of movies. The one called Krampus is not good, although people for some reason like it. But there's another one. Which I think is not in English, but basically they find out Santa Claus is not a human, but some kind of demon. And it's not a single demon, it's a race of demons. Hopefully I'm not spoiling the movie. I don't remember it so well, but that film was really, really good. So if you find that somehow through my description, enjoy.
Okay. Yeah, I think Grampus is a J League soccer team, but anyway, that's why I'm getting confused.
Okay.
But yeah, so Krampus, in that tradition, he takes bad kids to hell, but in this tradition, Zwarte Piet takes bad kids to Spain. I don't know if Spain is as bad as hell. But anyway, that's who these Dutch kids are. I think they're bad kids who were kidnapped by Zwarte Piet to Spain, and now they're abusing tourists and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. The whole thing is kind of ridiculous, but the guy who's making the gyros is his name is Nick.
Yeah.
Which I so is he supposed to be Santa Claus?
Yeah, he's supposed to be Sinterklaas. Yeah, because he's that's why he's getting labor complaints directed at him about
right.
going to the Netherlands. The Intocht, I think that's the ship, the steamboat.
Yeah,
because it's mentioned in the first story.
I see. Interestingly, this Pete's name is actually Hashish Pete.
Yeah, what was that? I didn't quite understand that.
Well, he's smoking the whole time through the comic, and it looks like just a fat joint the whole time. But I don't know. Actually, I hear hashish shrinks your gonads, so be careful. But yeah, I found the whole thing kind of interesting conceptually, and the artwork is once again very good. But you're right; it takes a long time to kind of get to the point. It's more of an atmospheric thing in the beginning, and then it kind of fades into this labor dispute, and then you kind of look at the whole of it and say, okay, so this is the reality of what Dutch people are saying is true. And it seems to run a little bit long for that, I think.
Yeah.
There's also this subplot about these tourists trying to get some doner kebabs, which doesn't seem to really connect with the A plot.
Yeah, the Sinterklaas stuff.
Yeah, so I kind of wondered about it.
Yeah, this artist is named Eric Y. W-H-Y. Like, why? I don't know. But yeah, he's also quite good. This is a pretty cartoony style. I mean, I don't know where Chad's finding all these excellent artists, but...
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't really look for artists. We just draw it ourselves. So I understand that Chad also is a visual creator, but he's on the lookout for artists. So, and he has a good eye. A lot of the artwork in his books is really good, or at the very least has some sort of exceptional quality to it if it's not ready for prime time, as they say. So I did have a comment overall on the book.
Okay, well, we should mention first that the back cover has drawn by Margaret de Heer. It's the whole history of Sinterklaas in the Netherlands, tracing kind of the whole tradition back to the year 280, and through the Middle Ages, references Krampus, and then all kinds of different stops along the way. In 1850, when Jan Schenkman added all these things to the tradition, including Black Pete, and on up to the present. And this is also really kind of gels the whole thing, and it's a nice cartoony bit, and another very good artist.
Yeah. That is true. Kind of reminds me of what's his name? Worked for Mad Magazine. Did Guru the Wanderer.
Oh,
Sergio Aragonés.
Sergio Aragonés, right?
Yeah, when he draws like really, really small people, they kind of look like this.
Yeah, I do see a bit of a similarity. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, excellent art. So, do you have any other words you wanted to add?
Yeah, go ahead. You were going to make a point about the whole thing.
Okay. My feeling is that the order of the stories is a little bit off. Um, the first story, Delusion, is so powerful and so perfect as to leave nowhere for the rest of the stories to go. And because it's your primer for the other stories, it's a little bit unfortunate that way. But at least, at the very least, let's see, which story was it? The supermarket story, Checkmate. I would have put first because it introduces a problem.
Okay. I can see
and
that.
then the second story being Delusion, and then after that, the third story being about the guy with the broken leg, and then the fourth story being the same. Because just having a little something before this first story as a kind of an appetizer.
Yeah, kind of draw you into the issue. That would have been good. Yeah.
Yeah, but see, this is the thing. This first story is so powerful in its narrative and also in its artwork, as to leave little space for the other stories to really breathe. If it weren't for the primer aspect of the story, I would say put it second to last. Because then it becomes the main course of this, I guess, anthology. But that is pretty much the only point that I'd say is a negative for me, the way it was set up. But it's not, don't get me wrong, it's not anything to dissuade you from picking up the book. Absolutely get this book. This is a top recommend, and all of these books have been excellent. We talked about issue 4 just a couple of weeks ago, I think. And my feeling was that one was good as the others. But my feeling about this one is that this is the best of this series so far, which makes me very interested in seeing what he does from here, because he seems to be getting better.
Getting a little more kind of focused and thinking about what he can do with this book. Yeah.
And the message and passion behind this one is very clear. Well, the message, but the passion behind it is very clear. And so it's not just a curiosity of what this person's going through, being a fish out of water. It is much more of informative piece on a problem that he found that he couldn't reconcile through any sort of fish out of water scenario.
Yeah. Chad in Amsterdam comics can be bought at chadinamsterdam.nl. The first 3 issues are also available on Comixology. So, we got an email from Pierre Dola. Last time we did Critiquing Comics, we talked about his comic Organic But Not Mental. So remember, this was the guy who was expecting us to trash his comic.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think I apologize for not trashing it so much.
Yes, you did. So he says, I've just heard the episode where you talk about my comics. Disappointed. Come on, boys. Where's the slashing and the gutting? I was expecting you could totally destroy me, but you're talking about Geiger and David Lynch. I'm not crying, I'm feeling better. You are sweetening my punani. I'm not sure what that means. Worse than that, you're encouraging me to keep on crapping on paper. Thanks for the time you wasted checking my stuff. I hope that in the future you won't be so kind. Mostly thanks for being so entertaining. I draw listening to your pod. I'll send you another word. Oh, yeah, he actually sent us another wordless comic. And after vomiting with the 30 pages required, maybe you can check the other comic that I'm sending you. Only 200 pages. See? Listen, this one is shorter. The name is From Granada to Cordoba. Okay, I don't remember what the title of the comic is. But so he talks about the new comic a little bit. Just one story. He says, "Hope you checked the first 30 pages. Thanks for the pod and for checking my stuff." So, thank you for the message. We're sorry. We'll have to be rougher next time.
Yeah. Actually, it is very, very cool to hear that. Feedback from the people that we critique, good or negative, is not only fair but really healthy. These critiques, I guess, as a dialogue more than just. I mean, I don't want to feel like Walter Cronkite here, and that's the way it is. No, because that's not the way it is. It's just the way I see it. And if you have an explanation or a rebuttal or some other part of the conversation that I missed, then absolutely write in and tell us about it.
You like cheap comic books, right? Well, I'm Professor Allen, and I talk about cheap comic books on the Quarterbin podcast. In every episode, I'll dissect a single comic from my collection, as long as I paid no more than 25 cents for the issue. Forget about $4 new comics that you can read in 4 minutes, or crossover events that can cost $100 to collect. Join me in the Quarterbin, where even bad comics are a bargain, and good ones are a steal. The Quarterbin podcast is part of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network. Visit us at relativelygeekypodcast.blogspot.com or search Relatively Geeky or Quarterbin Podcast in iTunes. I guarantee it'll be worth every penny.
Okay, so Mulele has an announcement.
Oh, just like that. Okay. Well, yeah, I think Tim and I have been doing this podcast for about 15 years. Is that right?
Well, so Deconstructing Comics, the first episode came out on December 5th, 2005. So right. We recorded it sometime in November, I think. So, yeah, we're almost up to the anniversary of the first recording with Brandon.
Yeah. And I've been off and on. I moved to America for a little bit, and then I kind of faded back in. And but not really enjoying mainstream comics so much. We kind of made this offshoot, this critiquing thing to discuss more independent ventures, and I've quite enjoyed it. But I've kind of come to a point where I feel that I need to step away from it for a little bit. So I'm going to step down as co-host for a while. If Tim has a comic where he's like, man, I really need Mulele to look at this one. This one is all about him. Not actually about me, but just like the things that I'm interested in. Then yeah, I'll come back for a one-off. But
maybe Chad number 6.
Oh, I'll be here for that. Yeah. But when I talked to Tim about it earlier. Was it a week ago?
Yeah.
2 weeks ago? I don't know. But I was still trying to kind of find the words for it. But what I've kind of come to understand is that next week, in fact, November 14th, I think it's the first day of this celebration with Black Pete, is my 50th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And I've been taking a hard look back at my life and kind of considering what I've done. It's true that every man looks back at his life and compares himself to what he was right around his birthday. In fact, it's so severe that a lot of men will die before their birthdays. Women usually live till after their birthdays. Something about enjoying the celebration, I don't know. But at least I heard statistically that bears true. But as I look back, I kind of feel a need to shift my focus. And doing this podcast for this many years has been quite interesting. And this is, I'm proud to say, one of the earlier podcasts. I don't know if it's the earliest comic podcast, but
well, there were others, but yeah, I mean, we've been at this 2005 is pretty early compared to most of the podcasts that exist now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's been kind of a long, interesting haul, but at this point in my life, I think I need to focus on my career so I can make some comics before I die, or can no longer create. Who is that artist? I forget his name. His last picture has this line that kind of runs from the bottom up to the top. Apparently he was drawing it, and just as he finished it, he had a heart attack and died.
Yikes.
But there's just like this line where his arm just went limp and ran up the page. Before that happens to me,
yeah,
I would like to make some comics. I've still got a lot of things that are just kind of left unfinished, and some things that I've put out there that have not finished, like Mind Gator. I've said 4 issues, and there are only 2, and it's now 5 years old. In fact, I mentioned to the translator of the comic, "Hey, I'm thinking about Mind Gator 3," and she's like, "That old thing, man, move on." It's like, what? I was telling a story. I'm still in the middle of my shit. But she's like, "No, you're done." Don't worry, I'm not done. I'm just taking a break, cigarette break. But anyway, there are also a lot of stories that I've never mentioned in public that I've never actually gone forward with because I didn't know how to print the thing that I was creating. I couldn't sell it to anyone who would help me with it. I just didn't have time to put it on paper. But after kind of opening myself up to all of these things and doing all of these projects and leaving a lot of things kind of unchecked in my own life, putting my own wants second to responsibilities or to requests from friends, because in general my policy is never say no. I kind of at this point can't say yes either. And I really do need to focus on something that will make me feel at least that I've done something with my life. To decide that at 49 and 350 something days, 60 days, is maybe a little bit late for some, but for me, I'm just getting started until I stop. And so, yeah, I'm going to take a break. So today is my last regular episode.
Well, I mean, yeah, you have put a lot of time into this podcast, so I appreciate that, because I've always thought you had a really good eye for these comics that we've been critiquing.
A little bit of a confession. When I first, and if you go back and listen to some of those early ones, you'll realize that I had a healthy disdain for everything. And I would shit on comics really hard just to shit on them.
Yeah, well, we were doing critiques on deconstructing before we spun it off to critiquing. And remember, some of those early critiques were really harsh, as I recall. Yeah, and there was some sort of sadistic pleasure in it. But, I mean, I looking back on it, I realized I was a man staring down a divorce and really just fucking hating my life, and wanted to share some of the hate. But, post-divorce, cleaning up my life, have moved on, have had some successes, some wins, and realized that it's not what I want to do. I don't want to shit on anybody's work. I will say very directly what I think it is, but I really want there to be a sense of dialogue rather than a sense of your comic is shit and mine isn't. It's just bullshit. So in that sense, trying to shift gears, I don't know when it was, maybe sometime around 2012, 2013, it's it's a dialogue. I'm talking to the artist here. Please do this, do that, do this, and this is what I think. So, I mean, I'm glad to have grown at least that much.
and not to claim that I've reached some sort of nirvanic perfection, but rather I've been able to grow a little bit, and I appreciate it. So thank you to Tim. Thank you, Tim. For the opportunity, and also thank you to everyone who sent in their comics thus far, whether I liked it, hated it, dismissed it, said something rude about it, or insulting, or whatever. Truly, thank you for all the comics.
Yeah. Now, there's still a queue of, 4, 5, 6 comics, and I realized that I didn't feel comfortable asking anybody else to do as many of them as you have. Within we've been, between the Patreon stuff and this, we've been recording almost every week for I don't know how long. So I've got at least 2 people lined up to help me get through the remaining comics and whatever more comes in. I should also say, so I've been kind of struggling with, because I've overextended myself habitually with doing critiquing and deconstructing and to the bat polls, and potentially if the patrons help us out a little bit more, or if new patrons come in, we'll have Patrick W. and I will have the podcast on Full Metal Alchemist, which we've actually sort of started, but we want to put it in its own feed. So, Mulele, you had talked before about why don't we release some of the Patreon stuff in the main feed, and one of my concerns was, will the patrons be upset if exclusive material becomes not exclusive anymore? So I did a survey of them. I just set up a questionnaire on Patreon, and nobody objected to the idea at all. Nice. They were fine with it. So, at some point in the next month or two, it also kind of depends on when our Full Metal Alchemist show gets its own feed. But I'm thinking like once or twice a month, I'm going to start putting out what we called Tim Catches Up with the MCU. Here in the Deconstructing Comics feed. So you'll still be hearing Mulele, but Mulele from like a year ago.
I'm actually almost 2 years ago when we started that.
I was going to look up when did we do the first one. So we skipped the 2 Iron Man movies because we had talked about them on Deconstructing Comics eons ago, and we skipped Hulk because I didn't really care about Hulk. So we started with Thor. Oh, wow, it has been. Yeah. I don't know when we recorded it. It came out on May 25th, 2019. So it has been right about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So that will be coming to the Deconstructing Comics feed fairly soon. And kind of depends on if I run out of other content too. But
yeah. But just to... about that show, we do run from Thor. Was it Thor? The first Thor movie.
The first Thor, right up to Far From Home.
Yeah, all the way through to Far From Home, and we get into it, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and some of the really, really good.
And we thought we would have done Black Widow by now, but.
Yeah. If that comes out in the theaters, maybe I'll come in for a guest. But I'm kind of doubtful that shit's going to come out even next year. I kind of have a feeling that even if there is a cure for this beer bug, it's going to be a while before everybody feels comfortable going to the theater again.
Well, although I guess we got theaters open in Tokyo.
Yeah, I've even been to the theater maybe 2 or 3 times during Corona.
And there's no food, right? And sitting every other seat, or
no food, social distance seating. The air is circulated every 20 minutes out of the theater. like 100%. So it's constantly moving. I actually felt very safe, and Japanese theaters are remarkably clean compared to American theaters, where I've heard rumors of, tales of rats, roaches, and everything else. Yeah. And now I hear in some theaters they sell alcohol as well, which is like, that's been for a while, I think, though.
Yeah.
But anyway, if that ever does kind of come together, I'll be down to review that. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, thanks a lot, Tim.
Oh yeah, thank you. So we're still critiquing comics, me with the other people I've lined up. You'll find out when we actually do episodes together. But if you'd like us to critique your comic, send a PDF or a link to mail@deconstructingcomics.com, and we'll read at least 30 pages of it and critique it on the show. So, till later, this is Tim.
And Mulele.
And thanks for listening to Critiquing Comics. Support this and all of our shows by joining us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/deconcomics for more details. Our theme is from bensound.com. Wednesday on Deconstructing Comics, Kumar and Emmett discuss the manga series Dorohedoro by Q Hayashida. See you then. Okay. Oh, I thought we should have mentioned your other podcast.
Well, we can just do a little addition if you want to clip it in.
Okay, well, I'm still recording, so we can tack this on the end. I did want to mention that you're doing another podcast besides this one. So
okay,
tell us about that.
Okay, actually, from 3 podcasts a week to one. I am doing a kind of collective podcast with Oscar and Chris, who were on the Akira podcast.
Our Akira episode back last winter or spring.
Yeah, I think it was just as Corona was beginning to hit.
Yeah.
But the 3 of us meet on Skype. This came about because Oscar, being really, really afraid of contracting anything, has refused to meet anybody or go anywhere for the past 6 months. 6, 7, 8 months, I don't know. But anyway, but he's become so lonely and distraught with not being able to kind of meet and talk art, that he suggested we do a podcast. And so really originally it was supposed to be just we kind of bullshit about our art and kind of talk to each other. And it's kind of escalated into comic reviews, movie reviews, and all these other things. But haven't quite announced it yet on the podcast there, but Oscar, once again, our spiritual leader, even though he calls me that, has said that it's a little bit too much for him. So we're going to slow down the podcast. It was weekly, and we recorded once every 2 weeks, but he says the idea of just pushing out content seems more like a job than something that he actually enjoys. So he wants to slow it down to a maybe once a month podcast. So probably starting with our next recording, it'll become once a month, and there'll be much more of a focus on what we're doing, what we're actually inspired by, those sorts of things, rather than a kind of a panic run to kind of, okay, let's consume the next thing so we can talk about it. Which is actually great for me as well, because, like you've heard today, I'm looking at my life thinking I need more time to do other things. Yeah. So,
and the name of the podcast is
Tokyo Comic Attack.
Yeah, it's important to get that in there, I think.
Very much so. Very much so.
Nobody can find it otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, the podcast is growing. I think we've got like 9 or 10 listeners now after doing it for 6 months. But basically, it is 3 comic book artists, 2 Americans, 1 European, talking about comics, inspiration, life. And it's much more rambly and ranty than your podcast, Tim. You're very much more to the point, and you keep me focused. But yeah, if you've ever heard me do a rant here, I do them over there occasionally. But Oscar also rants, and Chris, he's a little more silent, but still. What takes you about 30 minutes on this podcast takes us about 2 hours on that podcast. But anyway, we will continue to review some things, but it'll be out of the blue, whatever strikes our fancy. And right now, it's comics, but it may change at any point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so in both Tokyo Comic Attack and here, you're becoming more of an occasional podcaster.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. Especially with my new, hey, let's make 1 page of comics a day kind of kick. We'll see if that works. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So